Right now, let's turn our attention to my next guest, independent peer and director of the Academy of Ideas, Baroness Claire Fox joins us. A very, very good afternoon to you.
Hey, Julia.
Thank you so much for joining us. So much to talk to you about. Let's start, though, with this call for digital ID. Tony Blair, I mean, he's never found any problem he doesn't think could be solved with digital ID. I mean, he steps in chewing gum on the pavement. It's like, if we had digital ID cards, that would have solved that problem. This time, it's a bunch of Labour MPs, red wall MPs, blue Labour MPs, the ones who are very worried they're going to lose their seats in the next election, judging by the current polls, who know that immigration is a key issue. And they're saying, look, if we had digital IDs, if everyone had digital IDs like people have in Europe and other countries around the world, then we could stop illegal migrants working in this country illegally in the black market, and that would stop them coming to this country. What do you make of that plan?
So, I mean, you've covered this story so well in the programme, so a couple of additional points to make. I think it's interesting that there are red wall Labour MPs and blue Labour MPs, so we should note that there's a certain panic in the Labour Party, that there's a recognition that voters in general maybe reluctantly voted for Labour the last time, but it's by no means that they've got support from millions of working class people. Yeah. Second thing is, they know that immigration is one of the big issues that they have to address. And of course, it's nothing other than cynical that when they say we've got to do something to tackle the problem of both illegal migration and people working in the black market, we should introduce digital ID. Now, you've rehearsed very well already what's problematic about it. People worry about the social credit system from China. You know, will this lead to all sorts of ways that we are surveyed, surveillance will be brought in and so on and so forth, even control our behaviour. But I think apart from anything, the main thing is that I don't think we need it. Yeah, it's just quite simple. We do need to do something about tackling illegal migration. This is not the issue. This is not the way to do it. So it's irritating that they suggest bringing in a sort of very dramatic change
and very expensive
in free society, and it won't actually tackle the real problem. And if you wanted to do that, if they wanted to really get to the heart of it, these blue Labour, red wall MPs would be calling for a major overhaul of judicial activism. Yeah. Because one of the big pull factors has to be that you know that if you go through all that as an individual, because I'm not criticising them, who fight all their way to get to the UK, that honestly, at this stage, you can do anything while you're here. It's not a question of will they find out that you're working illegally. Yeah. You can actually be, I don't know, a rapist, a paedophile, a shoplifter, or whatever, and you won't get deported because some human rights legislative activist, a lawyer, will step in and say, no, you can't deport them.
Yeah, exactly. We've seen it again and again. And those stats show that people coming from certain countries who are more likely to be those who've arrived illegally in this country on the boats because they're not going to get in any other way, have a much higher propensity to commit crime and get convicted of crimes than does the population who are already here, and indeed migrants from other countries who've come illegal routes. I mean, that is the reality. And everyone can shout, oh, far right and xenophobe and racist at people pointing that out. But the facts aren't racist. They're not far right. They're just facts.
But even if you're a law-abiding, as it were, illegal,
yes, you're not committing other crimes after arriving here illegally.
What I'm saying is, if you have no intention of being a villain or doing some terrible, heinous crime, you must think, well, if I go to the UK, even the worst scum of the earth who are convicted don't get deported.
Yep.
So if I just go over there and kind of sit in the hotel and kind of behave, right?
I'll be all right.
I'll be all right.
And they're quite right. To think that. They're quite right. Exactly. And that is troubling. And again, it's our activist judges. Here's the thing, though. This is going to come as a surprise to you. It would appear that the activist judges at the European Court of Human Rights, who do not have a strong record, in my view, have actually made a good decision for once. This is a case involving Sir Philip Green. He's, the businessman, and he was basically exposed by the Labour peer Peter Hain when he, in 2018, named Sir Philip Green as the businessman who was at the centre of Me Too allegations. Now, a lot of allegations about sexual harassment of staff, very unpleasant allegations. They were front page of the papers, but there was this gagging order, which basically a super injunction that prevented him from being named. Now, Lord Hayne, as a peer and an MP, would have been entitled to do this, basically used privilege in Parliament of basically being able to name him, wouldn't be able to do it outside Parliament, but to name him in Parliament so that he could be named, and then newspapers and the media could use that privileged protection in reporting that he had been named in Parliament by Lord Hayne. Now, Philip Green has gone to court. He has lost his legal battle this morning to use European courts to limit free speech in Parliament. He wanted them to stop parliamentarians being able to do that, but judges in Strasbourg threw out his case, saying a decision in his favour would be incompatible with the autonomy of the UK Parliament. I mean, I don't know about you, I am flabbergasted, but how come so much of the time the European Court of Human Rights doesn't seem to recognise the autonomy of MPs in the British Parliament to make laws that are supported as democratically elected and accountable members of Parliament, but in this for once they're backing our Parliament's autonomy.
I know. Well, it's I don't want to overdo it on saying well done to the European Court of Human Rights. But I mean, again, a couple of other things to note here. Of course, I'm a great defender of parliamentary privilege. It's very important, and I get it, so I would defend it. But if anything, I think that what we need to do is to see that free speech shouldn't be confined to parliamentary privilege. I mean, one of the things I'm worried about is that you actually have the right to speak freely in Parliament, allegedly. But the problem is that if you're not in Parliament, if you're a member, if you're one of the people who voted, not for the Lords and Ladies, of course, because we're unelected, but if you voted for MPs, you don't have such a privilege. Yeah. And, one of your other stories is obviously people who are locked up for saying the wrong thing. So I get very anxious about over-stressing the importance of parliamentary privilege, even though it's important, because actually I would like to see such respect for free speech expanded to the voters.
Yeah, and it was really important. There was this whole thing that I remember at the time, we were on air here, I remember talking about it repeatedly, that, you've got these very, very rich, nearly always men, very rich men who basically have been accused of wrongdoing, and they basically get these super injunctions. So it's not even like we're allowed to say that that we can't tell you what the crime is that they're being alleged to have done, or the case. You're not even allowed to report their name, not any link with them. And I've seen some of these documents, and I know some of the names. Some of those names have still not come out. Famous actors and others. And it is an outrage that we can't discuss this openly. That said, I know you and I feel very strongly about people being innocent until proven guilty. We've got some very famous men who've been arrested and some charged with some very serious crimes just in the last week, and people treating them as if they are guilty without waiting for a court case. So it's very important to get a balance between the two.
Of course. It's very important that people think how they use that speech that they have that's free. I agree. But just as an aside, I also think that there's increasing use of non-disclosure agreements by employers, all sorts of employers. And this is really problematic. I mean, I've been following cases where, universities, for example, get academics to sign NDAs. And then, for example, if they're a victim of some kind of a trans activist witch hunt, they're not supposed to then talk about what's happened to them in terms of bullying. There's all employment tribunals are now making people sign non-disclosure agreements. Lots of things being done in secret. And I think that whilst it's hugely important that people are innocent until proven guilty, it's also the case that so much is now happening behind closed doors that it creates an atmosphere, I think a conspiratorial atmosphere, where people then start saying, well, why is it that they won't let us know about that?
Well, you lead on very well to another story I want to raise with you, and that is the post-Southport attack, the huge number of arrests and charges and prison sentences that were handed out to people, some for absolutely horrific crimes and violence and threats, absolutely banged to rights. But again, we'd have the absurd scenario of people being imprisoned simply for posts on Facebook and on X, Twitter, and then a few months later, people being let out of jail early who'd committed actual physical crimes, even sexual assault and rape, being let out of jail so we could keep those people behind bars, which seemed absurd, I think, to most sane people. Talk about the case of Lucy Connolly. She is the 42-year-old mum. She was a childminder. She's got 2 kids. She's also a carer for her sick husband. He's a Tory councillor. She came to prominence and notoriety for a very nasty, vile, and I would say racist message that she put on social media. It was up for only 4 hours before she realised it was, she shouldn't have written it, basically saying, doing mass deportations now, burn all the asylum hotels down with the people in it. I don't care. If that makes me racist, so be it, she said. But it was in the wake of the Southport attack. And it was when, of course, that disinformation was all over the internet, where a rumour went round that it was an asylum seeker who was responsible for that attack on those young girls, leading to 3 deaths and a dozen or more serious injuries of young girls. This woman had a post-traumatic stress disorder from her own child dying a few years earlier. She's a carer, she's a childminder. She had references from numerous people whose children she cared for who were themselves immigrants, Nigerians and others, who wrote references about what a wonderful woman she was and certainly didn't feel she was racist. She had herself admitted that the post was carried out in haste and was wrong, and she deleted herself within hours, way before the police turned up a few days later. She's still behind bars, serving a 2.5-year sentence. Now, Alison Pearson, The Telegraph, did a fantastic piece on her at the weekend, speaking to her husband and talking to about what she's going through in prison. She's repeatedly been refused the chance to get home, curfew home, and get early release to be with her family, with a tag, doing her full sentence, but doing some of it back at home. Lots of people have got involved in this. Elon Musk has now got involved. He has criticised prison chiefs for denying her the right to go home, when women who've committed multiple crimes, some violent, do get the right to go home. What do you make of this case? Is she, as many are claiming, a victim of not just two-tier justice, but is she now, on all intents and purposes, a political prisoner?
Well, I think that it's absolutely right that we make it very clear that people should not be locked up for speech crimes, and that also, whether she's a racist or not is irrelevant, because I don't think she should be locked up for thought crimes either. But it looks like, as you've explained and has been well documented now by Alison Pearson and more, that Elon Musk is right, that this is a great injustice, her being kept in prison. But context is all, isn't it? I mean, the context is that there is a prison crisis, overcrowding coming out the seams, and the Ministry of Justice has made some quite extraordinary decisions about early release schemes, where people literally, given a week, are just released for some very serious crimes to free up prison places. How ludicrous, then, that we have a situation where somebody who is obviously not a threat to the community is being kept in prison. And I just wanted to read the release on temporary licence scheme. This is what HMP Drake in Staffordshire, where Lucy's being held, said. This is a discretionary scheme. Each case is rigorously scrutinised by the office into the prisoner's conduct and any impact on the victim and the community, and is assessed based on public safety. Now, you just know, without anyone telling you, that if they rigorously scrutinise this particular case, she'd have been out last week, never mind being kept in. Yeah. And so I absolutely resent, and this is where the two-tier thing comes in, that they are letting people out very quickly on an early release scheme, and they are inappropriately holding people in prison punitively, and then using this absolute garbage of an explanation as to why. Yeah, that is what makes people lose faith in the criminal justice system. And when you were saying earlier, very importantly, it's important that we have innocence until proven guilty, and so on and so forth. Yeah. When you've got these kind of absolutely irrational, unfathomable decisions going on, people lose respect for the conventions of criminal justice and start naming names even when they shouldn't. Right? Yeah,
absolutely.
That's my problem.
It is soul destroying, isn't it? Because, and it's really, really important that we do have faith in the law. And we've seen, the two-tier policing. We've post Southport, we've seen two-tier policing. Of people said in terms of freedom of speech, even on social media, even the people who say that words matter, they seem to be remarkably unbothered by people on the left who were tweeting out some outrageous, quote, disinformation, blatant lies. No, apparently that's not a problem. I don't think our nation, as it is now, such as survives us not having trust, or vast swathes of us not having trust in the police and judicial system. Because, I know people who've got cases coming up, some sort of quite well-known people with whom I'm friends, who've got cases coming up in the courts. And I think a few years ago, I would have said, look, certainly, get a jury, don't we? You'll be fine. And we've seen, certainly in the wake of the Southport case, even people who have had more serious charges, they have been dismissed by the jury within minutes, because they just I'm sorry, we're not convicting someone of this. But I now have no faith in judges that they will make the right decision. And a couple of years ago, I was on a jury. I was so impressed with the system. I was so impressed at how much everyone on the jury cared. Everyone was taking notes. Everyone was, people really, really paid attention in court. I can't talk about what happened in the jury room, but people really cared about what was taking place and getting to the right decision. And I believe we did make the right decision. But now I kind of got no faith in the justice system anymore. And that's terrifying.
Yeah, no, the consequences of the two-tier criminal justice system, whether it's in sentencing, whether it's in who is released, what decisions are made about parole, who is deported and so on, is eating away at something very fundamental. And when we talk about a free society and a democracy, something that we've all been, and we actually say, you should sign up to British values if you want to live here and so on. We have to therefore protect those values, right? Free speech is one of them, but so is the justice system. And, people will not like me saying this, but one of the reasons why I had very little sympathy for the likes of Tommy Robinson was because he flaunted, and just completely ignored a situation where he was told he shouldn't say something because of the legal system, right?
Yeah.
And he just ignored that and kept naming somebody completely unfairly.
Yeah.
And the reason I'm saying that is because I can't then criticize even that way of behaving irresponsibly if, in fact, the system itself behaves in such a way as it treats people differentially. We have to think that justice is blind, that you will be treated equally under the law, and that they aren't going to use the legal system to make political decisions, which is what it feels like at the moment. And that's what it felt like after the Southport riots, because let's be honest, the call from politicians led to a situation where the DPP and the Director of Public Prosecutions made it clear that people who were arrested should be made examples of. And we were told, be careful of what you write, be careful of what you tweet, and all the rest of it, with this sort of passive-aggressive threat. And I think that has really caused a huge amount of damage to our belief in British justice. And once that goes, then I'm afraid people will stop believing in a fair police force. And I mean, the fact that that the police can turn up and knock on your door if you're in a WhatsApp group and criticize your kids' school's decision-making, and that you can be arrested in front of your kids and held in a cell, and then be told that you're to stop making a fuss about it afterwards and to stop going on and complaining about it, that also means that even basic policing is no longer trusted, because we know that. And
there never seems to be any punishment for the police officers, or indeed their chiefs who tell them to do this, for doing that as well. Claire Fox could talk to you forever, and I'm sure our audience would love us to. Baroness Fox, Independent Peer Director of the Academy of Ideas, thank you so much for joining us.